place is nowhere. And it's forever.
Ghosts of my life.
My name is Sam Tyler. I had an accident and I woke up in 1973. Am I mad? In a coma? Or back in time? Whatever's happened, it's like I've landed on a different planet. Now maybe if I can work out the reason.
Like the music from that Mitchell and Webb sketch, the Lost Stalk and Goose.
Oh yeah, it's like a Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
We're back. We are Lost Futures, a Mark Fisher podcast, and I'm your host, Stephen Klett.
And Marlowe.
And we're here with the next essay, The Past is an Alien Planet.
And I just want to say, if we do play David Bowie during this episode, it's allowed under fair use.
Yes, The Past is an Alien Planet, the first and last episodes of Life on Mars.
So Life on Mars was a show on BBC in the 2000s.
Yep. It aired from January of 2006 to April of 2007. Two seasons.
So there's not a lot to say about the show. It's basically just a cop is investigating some murder.
He's dating his co-worker. She gets kidnapped. There's like a subplot within a subplot in the initial episode.
Yeah, it's this like guy they're after, and he kidnaps his girlfriend or something.
Yeah,
and then he gets hit by a car and he wakes up in 1973.
Right.
And that's the series. And then in 1973, they're also chasing the same killer, I think.
Well, he initially seems to be sent back in time to solve the murder that was happening in the 2000s. Like, the whole first season is him kind of following those leads, using the knowledge that he knows from the 2000s to solve the murder in the 70s.
Right. Anyway, the long and short of, I think, what Mark Fisher was trying to get across, and this is largely a setup for his next chapter, but the main thing he's trying to get across is it has a very playing 70s character. It has a very, this is what you think the 70s is like, audience in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, does everything short of, like, some shit like, someone going like, oh, did you hear that kid from the Jackson 5 is trying to get a career now? Imagine such a thing. Like, they didn't do that, but they did, like, kind of everything short of that.
Yeah, I mean, it also has a lot of time travel tropes to it, like, it's got the meeting himself as a 4-year-old,
right.
Has the father ends up being part of the gang that's attached to some of the murders or some of the crimes that happened in the 70s, and he thinks his dad is such a good guy growing up and wondered why he disappeared when he was a child, and his mom told him this kind of tale about how great his dad was, but he had to go off, but he was a good person. And then he, as an older person, is watching his dad be a bad person and not believe it initially, and then find out that he was a criminal, and it turns out that he, like, sent his dad away when he found out that his dad was a criminal.
Right.
The obvious irony being that he wondered how his father left him and ruined his childhood, and it ended up being that he told him in the future. His future self told his dad to leave because it would be better for the kid not to know about his dad's crimes.
So it's like La Jetée.
Yeah. Especially in the first season, it has a lot of this time travel tropes. But, and we'll get into this later, he also thinks he's in a coma. And so...
Yeah, so there's this play between the two elements where is he actually in a coma from the car accident and dreaming that he's in 1973.
And throughout, you hear, like, the doctor's office.
Yeah, you occasionally hear, like, oh, is he gonna wake up? Oh, he just needs to hang on, or, like, shit like that.
And his entrance into present-day 2000 seems to be watching TV, and sometimes there's characters that talk to him as though they know.
or it's like something on the radio or like shit like that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of whatever series. I feel like you've seen better versions of it. And Mark Fisher also didn't like it, so I'm not just shitting on something Mark Fisher liked.
Let's talk about why he didn't like it.
So, yeah, like I said, he basically says its depiction of the 70s is very much a presentation of the 70s for a 2000s audience. And he says it reminds you of I Love the 70s more than it reminds you of the 70s.
Yeah.
And, yeah, watching the 2 episodes we did, and then watching the thing that's going to be in the next chapter, yeah, I absolutely see the contrast. You know, the police brutality being presented very much as this, like...
time period?
Well, just as very much like, yeah, that's how they did it back then, and like him being all like, oh, that's not how we police now, and I mean, just its presentation is very much like, I'm doing this because I'm 70s cop, and this is what 70s cop does. Versus the next thing we're going to talk about, where it's just like, yeah, no, the world is a brittle fucking place.
Yeah, next episode is about David Peace's The Red Riding series.
Right. Which basically, he's set up these 2 chapters as this is the dumb version of the next thing I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to why he thinks it's dumb, he does make an entire paragraph about the TV technical ability, which I think both you and I picked up on, that British TV is no longer capable of rendering any sense of lived-in world, which he... no matter what is filmed, it always looks as though it's been thickly, slickly painted in a gloss, like it's all a corporate video.
Yeah, there's a very 2000s BBC look that he's talking about that this show has. And yeah, it's in the production and like how they do it and how they shoot it. I couldn't fucking technically describe it, but yeah, he mentions Doctor Who. It also looks like Doctor Who from that era.
But he repeats this doesn't feel lived in critique, which goes back to what we talked about in the last episode with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, that in the 2000s, their 1970s doesn't feel lived in.
Yeah, I would say this more so than the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Like, the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy film was sort of like, hey, remember what Serpico was kind of like? Almost like as far as like gritty 70s, like trying to go for that. But yeah, sure, it was that done in the 2000s. And this is more like almost a joke. I mean, like I said, it feels like Back to the Future. It feels like at any moment someone could turn to the camera and go like, that Ronald Reagan actor? Huh, imagine him going anywhere in politics or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Even though he's already the governor of California.
Well, he does say it's like a theme park, and he gets into the simulation and...
Yeah, I mean, he has an interesting little Proust comment that I like.
Yeah, and it's right after everything is so iconic. And the thing about icons, after all, is that they evoke nothing. I like that quote, too.
Yeah.
But talk about the Proust,
Madeline,
Madeline,
I don't know how it's pronounced. But he just has this comparison to the, famous Proust story about tasting the cookie that, like, transports you back to a memory. And he's basically saying the power of the Madeleine is that it's not featured in any photographs, is that it's not this thing that's been displayed as of the era. It's sort of just this intimate thing with the subject and that time that this has none of. Basically.
Yeah, it's been kind of sapped.
You aren't being transported back to 1973 when you were listening to David Bowie. You were being transported back to listening to a classic rock station playing Bowie in 1999.
Yeah, he says it here, hearing T-Rex now doesn't remind you of 73. It reminds you of a nostalgia program about 1973.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, I think that's like the key part of this.
Yeah, and even without the nostalgia programs, I mean, the fact of the matter is, except for some people, I guess. You don't necessarily have a intimate memory of Bowie when, like, Bowie came out. It's kind of been detached from that time at this point, and just, well, it's a signifier of the time as viewed from the present.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wanted to say that since reading this, I pick up on this immediately when I watch period things. Like, we were just watching the Netflix series of Dahmer, or any number of like Dazed and Confused, Almost Famous, any kind of like 70s period piece. You kind of look for, as he says, you look for the anachronisms. I also look at those kind of things where I think about, what about in the 2000s are they pushing back in time? What kind of morals and values that weren't necessarily present in the 70s are they projecting from that time period? And I always feel like there was a lot of that in this, where
the one character is a funny misogynist racist guy for jokes.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that in the second. By the way, this is there are 2 blog posts. The first one,
this is about the first episode, and the next one's going to be about the last episode.
Right. And I do have a question. What do you think, in his first sentence, what do you he says it's symptomatic enough to be interesting. Symptomatic of what? And he sort of answers that, but I wondered what you
I would
made
assume
of that.
It's like the general thrust of this chapter of the return to the 70s and this exploration of nostalgia versus hauntology as it relates between the 2000s and the 1970s.
Yeah.
Generally.
This is a very short chapter, so this is going to be a short episode. So that's part 1, and next we'll get into the last episode. Alright, we're back. Here's some good insult.
Great, soft, sissy, girly, Nancy, French, bender, Man United supporting puff.
Leave him alone.
That was funny. And the funny thing about it, Stephen, is it's safe for us to do this on television in the 2000s because it's being spoken from a character from the 1970s and we're criticizing it.
Yeah, but then the irony is that
we're just doing it anyway.
that character becomes more liked than the regular character,
right?
Than the main character.
So the second part of this is his reaction to the last episode of the series and the end of the series, and very short. I think the summary is, he reflects that it's kind of reactionary and this is why, but also, again, quite short.
He starts out saying that the main tension of the entire show is this sort of what he calls ontological hesitation.
Is he in a coma, or is he actually in 1973?
Right. Is this real or not? And you see this in every episode, because the main character, Sam Tyler, played by John Sims, goes around to all the other characters and is like, I'm from the future. And nobody believes him.
But they also don't not believe him enough to not let him be a cop.
Yeah, he's like...
They're like, look, man, I don't want to hear about that. I don't want to, like, send you to a hospital or anything. But you can carry a gun around and be a cop.
Here's the thing. You seem like you have credentials.
Think you're from 2007. Is basically what everyone tells them.
Well, first there's the fantastic, which I wanted to talk about.
Right, yeah. So Mark uses this framework he's read.
Todorov, which is a literary critic who came up with or is he a film critic? I don't know. But he comes up with the term fantastic, which means it's between the genre of uncanny or marvelous. Uncanny being that which can ultimately be explained naturalistically, and marvelous being that which can only be accounted for in supernatural terms. That's the way Mark sets it up. But
it's like that movie everyone saw that for some reason is the only one I can think of. Kevin Spacey's K-Pax.
Well, explain it. Like, what's the...
In K-Pax, Kevin Spacey says that he's an alien, and then it kind of sort of leads to, oh, maybe he's a crazy person, maybe he's an alien, and then, like, he kind of disappears, or maybe he just runs away, and it's left ambiguous as to whether or not he was an alien or just a crazy person.
Yeah. And this entire series goes, is he in a coma? Is he actually a time-traveling person? One of my favorite things is in the first episode when he just looks down and his wardrobe is completely changed.
Anyway, I would say that he kind of uses that, though, this ambiguity as kind of a point of criticism for other aspects of the series, namely that it kind of uses ambiguity in other areas. For example, what is its position on police brutality?
Yes.
Where if you kind of take the show at face value, police brutality does get the job done, and
it actually does better than modern policing.
Right. So it's like, well, what lessons did we learn? I don't know. And then you get into, even beyond that, this whole idea of hauntology versus nostalgia, and he basically kind of calls this reactionary nostalgia. You know, just in it being this very frivolous theme park version of the 1970s as wasn't that a fun time? And it can pretend to have these vaguely like, oh, look how much we've grown, social justice, whatever the fuck, messages to it. But really, at the end of the day, it's like this voyeuristic 1970s theme park ride that you go, wasn't that a cute little time?
Yeah, he mentions it here that the reactionary nature is because the entire time this 2000s cop is like, I'm gonna do good, honest police work. I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna solve crimes in my 2007 way, which is gathering evidence and then starting a forensics. That was the big thing early on, was like, you don't have forensics? How do you not have forensics?
Right, but then, like, again, I mean, he's like, well, we need to preserve the blood for forensics, and the cop's like, why? And it's like, yeah, that's true. For 1970 technology, that's probably true. I mean, maybe you could test blood type and get lucky and maybe have it a thing to confirm, but, you know.
But yeah, he tries to be this good cop. It does end up being this good cop versus bad cop kind of thing, where he's trying to play by the books, have all of these abstract rules which have been beaten into him in the 2000s, where he's like, I gotta get the lawyer when the criminal comes in.
Right, and then the other cop has, like, a bloody knife in his desk drawer that he, like, just uses to say, like, hey, we found this on you to people.
Yeah. Or the sheet of acid that he had. Yeah. That was very funny.
Yeah, the very large sheet of acid he had.
He's like, we're just going to plant it on him, and
it's like, by plant it on him, do you mean, like, say that you found it when you arrested him? Because he's already in the station in custody. Like, you surely searched him when you arrested him. Like, I don't know. Anyway, dumb show, and Mark Fisher also thought it was dumb, and was right about the reasons he thought it was dumb.
Yeah, the show in the last episode tries to redeem that reactionariness, and he mentions it here. At the end of it, the guy from the 2000s betrays the guy from the 70s as a bid to go back to the 2000s, I think is sort of the trade-off. But like that betrayal, you know, leaves him with feeling like he's sort of lost something in the sterile environment of the 2000s in comparison to the colorful, explicit, kind of tough, beat up the criminals to get the bad guys kind of attitude that they display.
Yeah.
And he links this in the last thing to the political correctness kind of argument that is still raging in culture, which is, he says it here, the deep libidinal appeal of Hunt, the character they caught from the 70s, derives from his impossible duality as upholder of the law and he who enjoys unlimited jouissance. The two faces of the father, the stern lawgiver and père jouissance resolve, the perfect figure of reactionary longing, a charismatic embodiment of everything allegedly forbidden to us by political correctness.
Yeah, the show is that. I agree.
Yeah, and I just like the way he links it to political correctness in the end.
I mean, that is what the show is kind of saying. Isn't this fun because we don't have all these people telling you what you can't say or whatever the fuck it's kind of suggesting to its audience.
Well, it also reminds me of the Law and Order kind of universe, in that if you watch old Law and Order, there is the same tension where whatever Elliot Stabler will beat up a dude to get the answer, and then in later seasons they're like, well, whoa, we can't do that anymore, Maloney. Whoa, Stabler, we can't do that, it's different times now. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of that, but you are correct in that this is really,
I mean, or even The Wire. I mean, like, for as much as like anyone likes to talk about like that being such a progressive show, I mean, it showed like absolutely unchallenged police violence in that it depicted in an entirely positive light.
yeah, that it got the job done.
It didn't even get the job done. Like, oh, these cops are like overworked and tired and they deserve to be able to do this. Like, is a lot of it. They never like use violence to get answers. They only use violence in that show to like have vengeance when like a guy took a swing at a cop or something.
And that's the jouissance, right?
Right. Like, yeah. No, the jouissance factor. Yeah, a lot of jouissance in The Wire. Anyway.
That is our episode on Life on Mars, and tune in next week for David Peace and his adapters, and we'll play out the rest of Life on Mars.
Or no more than 30 seconds.
No more than 30 seconds, because the ghost of David Bowie is gonna come down with his aliens.
But where were the spiders in the... Ziggy played the guitar.